Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars. The year was 2387, and humans had been part of the big galactic family for over 200 years. Jake's ship, the U.E.'s Horizon, was not a warship. It was a research vessel. His job was to study old battlefields across the galaxy and learn about ancient history. The other alien races in the galaxy thought humans were nice and smart. They liked having humans around because humans were good at fixing things, healing people, and solving problems. Most aliens saw humans as weak but useful creatures. The Zephyrian Empire, which was made up of giant bug-like warriors, thought humans were just soft mammals who were only good for technical work. Jake did not mind what the aliens thought. He had more important things to worry about. His team had been studying the Kepler 442 system for 3 weeks now, and what they found there made his stomach feel sick. Dr. Lisa Harper was the team's expert on alien archaeology. She had been digging through the ruins on the third planet. For days, what she found were massive graveyards. Not just a few graves, but burial sites that went on for miles and miles. The bones belonged to dozens of different alien species that no longer existed. "Captain," Lisa called over the radio. "You need to see this." Jake put on his environment suit and took a shuttle down to the planet's surface. The air was thin and cold. The sky was a dull gray color. Lisa met him at the dig site, her face pale behind her helmet's glass. "How many?" Jake asked, looking at the endless rows of bones. "Billions," Lisa said quietly. "Maybe more. And Jake, these aren't natural deaths. Look at this." She showed him a skull from a creature that looked like it might have been intelligent. There was a clean hole through the back of it. The bone around the hole was smooth, not jagged like it would be from an accident. "Every skull we've found has the same mark," Lisa continued. "Precise, clean, professional." Jake knelt down and picked up another bone. It belonged to a different species, but it had the same type of wound. Someone had killed these creatures with great skill and efficiency. "Have you found any weapons?" Jake asked. "No," Lisa shook her head. "No technology, no ships, no signs of whoever did this. It's like they came, killed everything, and then vanished without leaving any trace." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. He had been studying ancient battlefields for 15 years, and he had never seen anything like. This wasn't a battle. This was an extermination. Over the next few days, Lisa's team made more disturbing discoveries. The burial sites were organized in a very specific way. The bodies were sorted by species, then by age, then by size. Everything was neat and orderly. Whoever had done this had taken their time and been very careful about it. "Captain," said Dr. Mark Johnson, the team's computer expert, "I've been analyzing the data from all our previous dig sites. I think I found a pattern." Mark showed Jake a holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations where they had found similar mass graves over the years. "Look at the spacing," Mark said, pointing to the dots. "They're evenly distributed across known space. And look at this." He pressed a button, and the map showed timeline data. All the mass graves were from the same time period, about 3,000 years ago. "Whatever species did this," Mark continued, "they didn't just attack randomly. This was planned, organized. They hit multiple targets across the entire galaxy at the same time." Jake stared at the map. The red dots formed a pattern that covered thousands of light years. The coordination required for such an operation was beyond anything he had ever seen. Meanwhile, back at the Galactic Confederation headquarters, Commander Alex Rodriguez was reading intelligence reports that made him very worried. The Zephyrian Empire was building up their military. Their ships were moving toward the borders of peaceful alien territories. War was coming, and it was going to be bad. The Zephyrians had always been aggressive, but lately they were talking about cleansing the galaxy of inferior species. Their first target would be the Altarian colonies. The Altarians were peaceful crystal-based life forms who spent their time doing mathematics and philosophy. They had no weapons and no army. Alex knew that once the Zephyrians started their war, they would not stop. They would keep conquering and killing until someone stopped them. The problem was that no one in the Confederation had ever fought a real war. They had been at peace for so long that they had forgotten how. On Earth, in a secret military base hidden deep in the mountains, General Patricia Williams was also studying the ancient battlefields. But she was not looking at them as an archaeologist. She was looking at them as a soldier. Patricia knew things that Jake Morrison and his team did not know yet. She knew the tactical patterns. She recognized the strategies. She understood the systematic approach to elimination. The species that had killed all those aliens 3,000 years ago had been very good at war. Too good. They had been so efficient at killing that they had scared themselves. So they had decided to stop fighting and try to live in peace. Patricia opened a file cabinet that had not been touched in over 200 years. Inside were records that only a few humans knew about. Records of humanity's real history. The history they had tried to forget. As she read through the old documents, Patricia made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. She picked up a secure phone and made a call. "This is General Williams," she said. "Begin Phase 1 preparation. Authorization code, Silent Thunder." On the other end of the phone, a voice answered, "Understood, General. How long do we have?" Patricia looked at the intelligence reports about the Zephyrian military buildup. She thought about the peaceful aliens who were about to die. "Not long," she said. "The galaxy is about to learn why we went to sleep. And God help us all when we wake up." 3 months after Jake Morrison's team discovered the mass graves, the galaxy changed forever. The Zephyrian Empire launched their war with brutal speed and efficiency. The Altarian colonies fell in just 4 days. The beautiful crystal cities that had stood for thousands of years were turned to ash and rubble. The Altarians, who had never hurt anyone in their entire history, were systematically hunted down and killed. Their mathematical songs, which had filled the air for centuries, went silent forever. The news reached the Galactic Confederation headquarters like a punch to the stomach. Alien diplomats who had never seen real violence sat in shocked silence as they watched the reports. Entire worlds had gone dark. Billions of peaceful beings were dead. Admiral Kevin Michel, the head of human fleet operations, watched the security briefings with his alien colleagues. His face showed no emotion, but inside, something old and dangerous was waking up. The other species in the room were talking about sanctions and diplomatic protests. Kevin said nothing. The Zephyrian Empire announced their next target, the Oceanic worlds of the Cetacean Alliance. These were water planets where intelligent whale-like creatures lived in harmony with their environment. They had no weapons, no armies, no way to defend themselves. Back on the archaeological site, Dr. Lisa Harper was making discoveries that terrified her. She had found ancient data storage devices buried deep in the ground. Most of them were damaged, but her team managed to recover some information. The data told a story that made Lisa's blood run cold. It described a species called the Silence Bringers. They were described as bipedal mammals with incredible endurance and pack-hunting instincts. But what made them truly frightening was their ability to adapt their fighting style to any enemy. "Jake." Lisa called her captain over to the computer terminal. "Look at this." The ancient records described battles where entire space fleets simply vanished. There were no distress calls, no emergency signals, no survivors. One day the fleets were there. The next day they were gone, as if they had never existed. The silence. Bringers didn't just win wars, Lisa read from the translation. They erased their enemies so completely that even the memory of the conflicts faded from galactic history. Jake felt his hands shake as he read the ancient text. The description of the Silence Bringers' tactics was horrifyingly familiar. The systematic approach, the complete elimination of targets, the way they left no trace of their methods. "Lisa," he said quietly, "run a genetic analysis on the bone samples we collected." "I already did," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "The DNA degradation patterns, the bone density measurements, even the tool marks on the weapons we found. Jake, they all point to one conclusion." Jake didn't want to hear it, but he already knew what she was going to say. "The Silence Bringers were human," Lisa said. "Our ancestors did this." Meanwhile, on Earth, General Patricia Williams was no longer hiding. Deep beneath the Appalachian Mountains, facilities that had been dormant for 3 centuries came back to life. Ancient weapons were taken out of storage. Production lines that had been shut down since humanity joined the Confederation began to hum with activity. Patricia walked through the underground complex, watching as her people prepared for something they had hoped would never happen again. These weren't regular soldiers. They were volunteers from specific families, people who carried the old bloodlines and remembered the old training. "How many have answered the call?" Patricia asked her aide, Colonel Danny Brooks. "More than we expected," Danny replied. "Word is spreading quietly through the right channels. Teachers, doctors, engineers, parents. All of them remember the stories. Their grandparents told them. And the equipment? Being distributed now, the old caches are being opened. Everything is still functional." Patricia nodded. Humanity had spent 300 years trying to forget what they were capable of. But they had kept the tools, just in case. The Galactic Confederation was growing desperate. The Zephyrian advance seemed unstoppable. Their military doctrine was simple: overwhelming force and intimidation. It worked against species that had evolved for cooperation, not conflict. The Confederate leaders held emergency meetings every day, but they couldn't agree on what to do. Some wanted to try diplomacy. Others suggested economic sanctions. A few even talked about surrender. Finally, they did something they had never done before. They formally requested that humanity contribute combat forces to defend the galaxy. The request was delivered to Admiral Mitchell in a private meeting with the Confederate High Council. Alien leaders from dozens of species sat around a circular table, their faces showing fear and desperation. "Admiral Mitchell," said the Confederation's Chancellor, a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes, "we need your help. We know humans prefer peaceful solutions, but we're running out of options." Kevin looked around the table at the alien. Leaders. They had no idea what they were asking for. They saw humans as helpful but weak. They thought they were requesting some technical support and maybe a few security guards. "I'll need to consult with my superiors," Kevin said calmly. "This is not a decision humanity can make lightly." That night, Kevin sent a coded message to Earth. It was very short. "They're asking us to wake up. Recommend immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel from target zones." The response came back within an hour. It was even shorter. "Authorization. Granted. God help us all." The next morning, Kevin returned to the Confederate High Council with his answer. "Humanity accepts the request for military deployment," he said, handing them a single sheet of paper. "However, we strongly recommend that all non-combatant personnel be evacuated from the conflict zones immediately." "That's very considerate," said the Chancellor. "But surely that won't be necessary. How many ships are you contributing?" Kevin stood up to leave. At the door, he turned back one last time. "Ships?" he said with a cold smile that made several aliens step backward. "Chancellor, you're thinking too small. We're not sending ships. We're sending ghosts." As Kevin walked out of the room, he could hear the confused murmuring behind him. The aliens thought they were getting a few human support vessels to help with logistics and medical care. They had no idea that they had just awakened something that had spent 3 centuries learning to control itself. Something that had voluntarily gone to sleep rather than finish what it had started long ago. Galaxy was about to remember why humanity's ancestors were called the Silence Bringers. And this time, there would be witnesses to tell the tale. The Zephyrian Empire was feeling very confident. They had already destroyed 3 peaceful civilizations and were now approaching their 4th target, Serenity Prime. This beautiful garden world was home to the Confederation's most important diplomatic academy. Thousands of young aliens from across the galaxy came here to learn about peace and cooperation. Emperor Vex then himself led the attack fleet. His massive battle cruiser, the Divine Conquest, was surrounded by 300 other warships. As they approached Serenity Prime, the Emperor was already planning his victory celebration. "This will be even easier than the others," he told his officers. "The planet has no defenses except for a small Confederate patrol. We'll be done in time for dinner." But as his fleet entered orbit around Serenity Prime, something unexpected appeared on his sensors. A small human fleet had moved to intercept them. Just 12 ships against his 300. The Emperor laughed so hard that his chitinous armor rattled. "Are these humans insane? Do they think 12 ships can stop us?" His laughter stopped when the human ships simply vanished from his sensors. "What happened?" the Emperor demanded. "Where did they go?" His sensor officer, a nervous young Zephyrian, checked his equipment 3 times before answering. "Sir, they're just gone. No energy signatures, no heat traces, nothing. It's like they never existed." Down on Serenity Prime, Colonel Danny Brooks was getting his soldiers ready for their first real mission in over 2 centuries. His unit had no official name and wore no identifying marks. They called themselves Ghosts, and as their transport, ships used cloaking technology to land on the planet's surface. They began to remember skills their species had tried very hard to forget. The men and women under Danny's command looked like ordinary people. There was Sarah Kim, a kindergarten teacher from Ohio, Tom Bradley, an accountant from Texas, Rebecca Stone, a nurse from California. But as they put on their gear and checked their weapons, something changed in their eyes. Something old and dangerous and very, very patient. The Zephyrian ground assault began at sunrise. Thousands of insect warriors in powered armor dropped from the sky like metal rain. Their plan was simple: land, kill everything that moved, and claim the planet for their empire. By noon, the Zephyrian commanders were very confused. Their advance units had stopped reporting in, not because they were under attack, but because they had simply disappeared. Unit 7, report status, called Major Cricksdale into his radio. Silence. Unit 12, respond immediately. More silence. Unit 15, this is command. What is your situation? Nothing but static. Lieutenant Sarah Kim moved through the forest, with her team like they were part of the shadows themselves. They made no sound, left no tracks, and when they encountered Zephyrian patrols, those patrols simply ceased to exist. No gunfire, no explosions, no dramatic battles. Just sudden, complete silence. Target acquired, Sarah whispered into her throat microphone. Eliminating now. A squad of 10 Zephyrian warriors was moving through the trees, their heavy footsteps crushing the undergrowth. They were looking for human defenders to fight, expecting to see them coming with guns blazing and battle cries. Instead, they saw nothing at all. One moment they were walking, talking to each other about how easy this mission was going to be. The next moment, there was only empty forest and the sound of wind in the leaves. On board the Divine Conquest, Emperor Vexton was staring at his tactical displays with growing alarm. Red icons representing his ground units were going dark one by one, not changing color to indicate battle damage, just disappearing. "Get me a status report from the surface," he ordered. "Sir, we're trying," replied his communications officer. "But we're getting no response from anyone on the ground. It's like they've all just stopped talking." Major Tom Bradley's strike. Team had a very specific mission: eliminate the Zephyrian command structure. They didn't approach the enemy headquarters with tanks or explosions. They simply appeared inside the building as if they had walked through the walls. The Zephyrian officers never saw them coming. One moment they were studying their battle plans, confident that their overwhelming numbers would win the day. The next moment, they were unconscious on the floor, and their communication equipment was sending false all clear signals to the fleet above. Tom looked at his team members and nodded. They had neutralized the command center without firing a single shot. The Zephyrians would wake up in a few hours with no memory of what had happened, but by then it would be far too late. As the day went on, the pattern repeated itself across the entire planet. Zephyrian units would advance into an area, report that everything was normal, and then simply go silent. No explosions, no laser fire, no signs of battle at all. Emperor Vexton became increasingly desperate. He sent down more troops, better equipment, elite units with the latest technology. The result was always the same: silence. "This is impossible," he said to his staff. 50,000 warriors don't just disappear. Where are the human defenders? Why can't we see them? His intelligence officer, a scarred veteran of many campaigns, looked very worried. "Sir, I've been analyzing the data. The humans aren't fighting us in any way we understand. They're not trying to hold ground or protect specific targets. They're hunting us." "Hunting us?" The Emperor's voice cracked slightly. "We're the greatest warriors in the galaxy. No one hunts Zephyrians." "Sir," the intelligence officer continued, "I've studied every battle we've ever fought. This is different. The humans aren't behaving like any species we've encountered. They're moving like like predators." As night fell on Serenity Prime, the Emperor made a decision that would haunt him forever. He decided to go down to the planet's surface himself to take command of the situation. His personal shuttle landed near what should have been a Zephyrian base camp. Instead, he found empty tents, abandoned equipment, and no sign of his soldiers. "Anywhere. Hello, Emperor." Vex then spun around, his weapon ready. Standing behind him was a human in simple black clothing. The man looked completely ordinary, like someone you might see working in an office or teaching a class. But his eyes were cold and ancient and absolutely terrifying. "I am Colonel Brooks," the human said calmly. "I believe you wanted to conquer this planet. Where are my warriors?" The Emperor demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Safe," Danny replied. "Sleeping. They'll wake up tomorrow on a transport ship heading back to your home space. Most of them won't remember what happened. Here. This is impossible. You're just one human. My fleet has 300 ships." Danny smiled, and the Emperor felt his blood turn to ice. "Emperor, you made a mistake. You thought we were like the other species you've been killing. Peaceful, weak, unable to defend ourselves." Danny took a step forward, and somehow the Emperor found himself backing away. "We're not like them," Danny continued. "We're the species that killed all those others 3,000 years ago. We're the reason the galaxy has been so quiet and peaceful for so long. We've been sleeping, but you woke us up." The Emperor's last transmission to his fleet was cut short. The final thing Zephyrian High Command heard was a calm human voice saying, "Target eliminated. Zone secure. Awaiting next assignment." High above Serenity Prime, the 300 ships of the Zephyrian Fleet waited for orders from their emperor. They would wait for a very long time. The news of what happened at Serenity Prime spread through the Galactic Confederation like wildfire, but nobody really understood what had occurred. All they knew was that an entire Zephyrian battle group had simply vanished. 300 ships, 50,000 of the galaxy's most feared warriors, gone without a trace. The Emperor's flagship, the Divine Conquest, was found drifting in space 3 days later. The life support systems were working perfectly. There was no damage to the hull. But the crew was gone. All of them Confederation investigators boarded the ship and found something that gave them nightmares. The corridors were empty but clean. The weapons were still in their storage racks. The food was still warm in the cafeteria. It was as if thousands of Zephyrian warriors had simply decided to walk out an airlock, disappear into space. But there were no bodies floating around the ship. No signs of struggle. No evidence of what had happened. Just empty rooms and the strange feeling that something had walked through those halls that was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Back on Earth, General Patricia Williams was reading the reports with satisfaction. Phase 1 had worked perfectly. Now it was time for Phase 2. Across human space, people were getting phone calls. A teacher in Montana left her classroom and told her principal she had family business to attend to. An accountant in Florida closed his office and bought a one-way ticket to a destination he couldn't tell his wife about. A doctor in Oregon handed her patients over to colleagues and vanished into the night. These weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were ordinary people who carried something in their genes that most humans had forgotten. The ability to hunt, to track, to eliminate threats with prehistoric patience and modern precision. Captain Rebecca Stone had been a nurse before she got the call. Now she was leading an assault on the Zephyrian fortress world of Herax 9, a planet-sized military installation that had never been conquered in 2,000 years of warfare. But Rebecca wasn't planning to conquer it. She was planning to make it irrelevant. Her approach didn't involve massive bombardments or heroic charges. Instead, over the course of 6 months, the fortress simply stopped working. It started small. Supply convoys that were supposed to arrive at Herax 9 never showed up. The crews would be found later, alive and unharmed, on abandoned asteroid stations with no memory of how they got there. Communication arrays suffered random technical failures that repair teams couldn't fix. Personnel began reporting strange incidents. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Vexner to his commander, "Third Squad missed their check-in again." Again? General Krixvar was getting tired of these reports. "That's the 5th Squad this week. What's their excuse this time?" "They say they got lost, sir. They were doing a routine patrol of Sector 7 and somehow ended up in Sector 12. They have no memory of the past 6 hours." General Krixvar slammed his fist on his desk. Elite warriors don't get lost walking down a hallway they've used for 10 years. But it kept happening. Patrols would leave for routine assignments and return hours later, confused and disoriented. Equipment would malfunction in ways that made no sense. Security cameras would show empty corridors one moment and sleeping soldiers the next. Dr. Lisa Harper, now working directly with Confederation intelligence, was analyzing patterns of human operations across Zephyrian space. What she found terrified her more than the ancient mass graves ever had. The humans weren't fighting a war in any traditional sense. They were conducting an extermination campaign with scientific precision. But unlike their ancestors, they weren't killing anyone. They were doing something much more sophisticated. "Look at this data," Lisa showed Commander Alex Rodriguez her findings. "Every Zephyrian military installation is reporting the same things. Personnel going missing for hours at a time. Equipment failures that can't be explained. Communication. Breakdowns that happen at exactly the wrong moment. It's like they're not trying to destroy the Zephyrian military," Alex said, studying the reports. They're trying to make it irrelevant. Exactly. And Alex, look at the psychological profiles we're getting from Zephyrian prisoners. They're all showing the same symptoms: confusion, disorientation, and a strange desire to avoid conflict. Meanwhile, across Zephyrian space, entire worlds were going dark. Not from bombardment or invasion, but from something far more subtle and infinitely more final. The Zephyrian colony world of Nexus 7 reported normal status one day, then stopped answering their communications the next. When a Confederation investigation team arrived, they found the planet completely abandoned. Not destroyed, not damaged, just empty. The colonists were found 3 systems away, living peacefully on a barely habitable world. When asked why they had left their comfortable homes, they all gave the same answer: it seemed like the right thing to do. Medical examinations showed no signs of coercion, drugs, or mental manipulation. The Zephyrians genuinely believed they had made the decision to leave on their own. Admiral Kevin Mitchell was coordinating the human operations from a secret command center that officially didn't exist. His staff was small, just 12 officers, but they were managing a campaign that spanned half the galaxy. "Status report," Kevin said to his aide, Major Lisa Chun. "Phase 2 is proceeding ahead of schedule," Lisa replied. "The Zephyrian Empire is experiencing system-wide communication failures. Their supply lines are completely disrupted. Morale is collapsing." "Any resistance?" "Some. The outer colonies are putting up a fight, but it's not organized. Most of their commanders are either missing or suffering from what their doctors are calling strategic confusion syndrome." Kevin nodded. Strategic confusion syndrome was what happened when a military leader's decision-making ability was subtly but systematically undermined. It was an old technique that humans had perfected long before they joined the Confederation. The last free Zephyrian admiral, General Krixvar, was becoming increasingly desperate. His fortress world was still functional, but barely. Half his personnel were suffering from mysterious navigation disorders. His communication equipment worked perfectly, but somehow his messages never reached their destinations. In desperation, he sent a message on an open channel that every receiver in the galaxy could pick up. "This is General Krixvar of the Zephyrian Defense Force. I am speaking to the human commanders who are doing this to us. What do you want? What have we done to deserve this? We can't fight an enemy we can't see, can't find, can't understand. This isn't war. This is extermination by ghosts." The response came 12 hours later on the same open channel. It was broadcast to every receiver in Zephyrian space. "General Krixvar, this is Admiral Mitchell of the human fleet. You know what you did. You began a campaign to eliminate peaceful species. You chose to become a threat to galactic stability. We are simply correcting that threat." There was a pause. Then the voice continued. "You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally and evacuate your military forces to designated sanctuary worlds. Your civilians will not be harmed. Your culture will be preserved. Your species will survive. But your capacity to make war will be permanently removed." Another pause. "This is your only warning. After 72 hours, we will finish what our ancestors started 3,000 years ago. The choice is yours." General Krixvar stared at the communication console for a long time after the message ended. Around him, his staff waited for orders that he found he couldn't give. Somehow, he knew that the humans weren't bluffing. Somehow, he knew that if he refused their offer, the Zephyrian species would simply cease to exist, just like all those other races whose bones were buried undead. Worlds across the galaxy dot with shaking hands, he began preparing the surrender documents. 71 hours and 37 minutes after Admiral Mitchell's warning, the Zephyrian Empire ceased to exist. There were no massive explosions, no dramatic final battles. No heroic last stands. The Empire simply stopped military bases. Across Zephyrian space were found abandoned, with no signs of struggle or violence. The weapons were still in their storage rooms. The computers were still running. But the soldiers were gone. Population centers reported that their citizens had suddenly developed an overwhelming urge to travel. Families packed their belongings and headed to human-designated sanctuary worlds, with most people saying they simply knew it was time to leave. Government officials were discovered unconscious at their desks, with no memory of the previous week. Extensive medical scans showed no evidence of drugs, violence, or mental manipulation. They had simply gone to sleep. The surrender document was signed by Emperor Vex then himself, though when he woke up, he had no memory of the preceding month. The document was written in his own handwriting and bore his personal seal, but he swore he had never seen it before. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, was put in charge of integrating the surviving Zephyrians into Confederation society. To his surprise, the process went remarkably smoothly. The former emperor and his military leaders seemed genuinely grateful to be alive. They expressed sincere regret for their previous actions and showed an unusual eagerness to contribute positively to galactic civilization. When psychologists studied them later, they found that these feelings were completely genuine. Though no one could explain the sudden personality changes, Dr. Lisa Harper published her final report on the ancient extinctions. Though the most important sections remained classified, her public conclusions suggested that the galaxy had experienced periodic corrections throughout its history, where overly aggressive civilizations were removed by an unknown force. The evidence suggests, she wrote, that some species develop beyond the point where warfare is their primary means of conflict resolution. When they encounter civilizations that threaten galactic stability, they respond with methods that are so advanced and efficient that they leave virtually no trace of their intervention. The Galactic Confederation Council held a formal ceremony to thank humanity for their assistance in resolving the Zephyrian crisis. The vote was unanimous, though several council members privately admitted to having strange dreams about being watched by patient ancient eyes. Humanity has once again demonstrated their commitment to peace and galactic stability, announced Chancellor Trixon, the same three-eyed being who had originally requested human military assistance. Their swift and bloodless resolution of the Zephyrian threat shows that violence is not always necessary to resolve conflicts. Admiral Mitchell accepted the commendation with a slight smile. He didn't mention that the swift and bloodless resolution had involved the largest military operation in human history. He simply thanked the Council and promised that humanity would always be ready to help maintain galactic peace. Behind the scenes, General Patricia Williams was quietly deactivating the awakening protocols. Across human space, teachers returned to their classrooms, accountants went back to their offices, and doctors resumed caring for their patients. The ancient weapons were put back into storage. The dormant production facilities powered down. Humanity's military simply faded back into peaceful obscurity. But something had changed in the galaxy. Other aggressive species began experiencing strange phenomena. The Korvax Dominion, known for their expansion campaigns against weaker neighbors, suddenly found their leaders developing an interest in diplomatic solutions. Their war plans were mysteriously replaced with proposals for economic cooperation and cultural exchange. The Yataran clans, feared raiders who had terrorized shipping lanes for centuries, began reporting strange dreams. Their warriors would wake up with vivid images of peaceful planets and happy families, and a growing desire to protect rather than destroy. Warlike cultures across the galaxy developed unexpected philosophical movements focused on cooperation and mutual benefit. Aggressive governments found their military commanders suddenly becoming advocates for peaceful exploration rather than conquest. Admiral Jake Morrison, now commanding the exploration vessel New Dawn, continued his archaeological surveys. But he began noticing something new in his data. Evidence of recent activity on ancient battlefields. Someone had been visiting these sites, cleaning them, maintaining them. It was as if something was returning periodically to check on its old work and ensure that the lessons remained clear. "Lisa," he called to Dr. Harper during one of their expeditions. "Look at these readings." "Recent disturbance in the soil," she confirmed. "Within the last few months. But there's no sign of excavation equipment or heavy machinery." "Someone walked through here," Jake said quietly. "Someone wanted to make sure these graves were still here, still visible, still sending their message." On Earth, Admiral Kevin Mitchell retired from active service and bought a small house in the countryside. He spent his days gardening and reading, but every night he received brief reports from across the galaxy. Human patrol ships, invisible to all known sensors, maintained a network that spanned known space. They watched and waited, making sure that the Great Peace continued undisturbed. One evening, as Kevin was teaching his granddaughter to plant flowers, she asked him a question that made him pause. "Grandpa, what did you used to do in the military?" Kevin looked down at her innocent face and smiled. "I helped keep the galaxy peaceful, sweetheart, and I hope I never have to do it again." Above them, a shooting star crossed the evening sky. Except it wasn't a meteor. It was a human patrol ship, part of the network that had replaced the old Zephyrian threat with something far more subtle and infinitely more effective: the ship's crew of 3 specialists monitored communications across 17 star systems, watching for signs of aggression, territorial expansion, or threats to peaceful civilizations. Their equipment could detect hostile military buildups months before they became actual threats. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the former kindergarten teacher, was now permanently assigned to Deep Space Patrol. Her job was simple: make sure that no other species ever again felt the need to test humanity's commitment to galactic peace. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported her sensor officer. "Appears to be a Thraxian scout ship investigating the old Zephyrian territories." "Any hostile intent?" "Negative. Just curiosity. They're staying well away from the sanctuary worlds." Sarah nodded. The Thraxians were naturally aggressive, but they had heard the stories about what happened to the Zephyrians. They were being very, very careful not to cross any lines. "Log it and continue patrol," she ordered. "And send a greeting message. Let them know we're here." The Thraxian ship immediately changed course and headed back to their own space at maximum speed. Across the galaxy, intelligent species slept soundly in their beds, never knowing how many ancient, patient guardians stood silent watch in the darkness between worlds. They dreamed of peace and cooperation, never suspecting that those dreams were gently encouraged by a species that had learned the hard way that true strength meant, knowing when not to use force. The galaxy remained peaceful, and humanity continued to be seen as helpful, gentle beings who were good at fixing things and solving problems. It was exactly the way they wanted it. In the vast silence between the stars, the descendants of the Silence Bringers maintained their vigil, making sure that the galaxy never again forgot the most important lesson in the universe. Some species choose peace not because they are weak, but because they are too strong to risk the alternative.